Hi, my name is Farhan Hawk, aka Mr. Hawk, the face behind the brand. I'm a fashion designer based here in Toronto. Fashion didn't start for a while in my life. The first half of my life, I was a dancer, and then from that, it kind of moved into fashion through the interest in costumes. It wasn't until I think mid-high school, I was working a lot on costumes, and I really enjoyed like sewing, and I have always sewn my entire life. Like my mom kind of taught me here and there. And then eventually I think it like worked its way into fashion, specifically women's wear, because I was surrounded by so many females my entire life. Dance is definitely like always at the back of my head when it comes to like the design process and trying to figure out, okay, what is my next show? My first clothing, like garments that were like shown to the world was prom. My friend Saraf, who is also now on my PR team, had gone everywhere and she couldn't find the right prom dress. So as a joke, I had said like I can make it. Before then, I was just making costumes. So, you know, a gown for a prom gala is a whole different story. But then from her gown, 3 other friends wanted something for prom. So I ended up making 4 prom gowns, and prom night was practically my first debut as Mr. Hawk. So this is the Mr. Hawk studio. It's a little home studio in my parents' house. Until we move to a bigger one, this is where Mr. Hawk resides. Over here, this is all the pieces from the show that got cut out because I didn't like them or I wanted to move them to something else. Yeah, so when I first had the studio, this is all I had. I didn't really have much to it. These are like my first 2 little babies. This is where it all began. Fun fact, on the mannequin, this is like one of my first pieces. Like one of my first actual tailored pieces that I made. These are all my patterns. Not all my patterns, but I keep some, like ones that were harder to make, I definitely keep those ones. So I kept that one because I definitely have gotten a lot of messages on if I can sell that to them or if I could remake it for someone. So this is where it all really starts. So like you kind of have this like torso block, and then you just modify this block and turn it into what you want. A lot of times, like in my opinion, I don't think fashion design is that difficult, but then I think the pattern making aspect of it is kind of tricky. So you just have to be able to like look at it on the paper and like see it like as one form. If someone is starting out, definitely what they should do is just trial and error. Like get like the cheapest fabric you can find and just make like a bunch of things and see what works, what doesn't work, and why. Like also try and figure out why that didn't work. Before this, I was just working off our dining room table. Like it was like, if we had the dining room table, it was like, this is my pattern making table, and then this is my sewing table. Like it was all right next to each other, and the entire dining room was a disaster. Like you would see fabric everywhere, string everywhere. Originally, I hadn't decided like, oh, fashion school is where I want to go. It was originally I'm gonna go to school for costume design for stage productions because that's all I was doing. I think I woke up one day and I was like, why am I like? Because I realized I liked costume design, but then it was like I would rather see something going down the runway. And then I ended up getting into Toronto Film School and I went with them. I usually say this to like a lot of people who ask like, should I go to school for fashion design? Like, yes, because there's so much knowledge that you learn from your profs that you can't get out of a textbook, you can't get out of an online class. And I became a better designer for it. Like my work from before school to now is like completely different. This is my new baby. This is very important in the studio. Also, it's nice because it's like a little corner of the studio, so it's just like, this is where everything happens, like where all the sewing happens. It was very important to have this spot like just peaceful and like calm, because I do go a little crazy sometimes when I'm sewing if something's not going the way I want it. So this is a industrial juki. So this is like something like I think every fashion student aspires for at some point in their life, where you want that industrial level machine. Another big part is like when I'm sitting here and I'm sewing for hours on end, and it's like 5 a.m. in the morning, and just knowing when I have to stop, because at some point the quality of the work just goes down. Like you just stop working as efficiently as you could. Definitely like turning on the machine is like almost like, because the sound of the vibration like fills the whole room. So it's almost like, I don't know, like when a rocket is like starting and it's about to blast off. So it just makes me get in the mood to start sewing and to start working. The year after I graduated, I went back to my high school to actually help them with the show, like the next musical. And then that's where people started calling me Mr. Hawk, because I was like a student teacher, but I actually wasn't. They just started calling me Mr. Hawk, and I don't know, I just liked it. Every designer has that weird complex of like, just like darker, more evil to a sense. So I feel like when I think of Mr. Hawk, it is very like on the darker side. Like that's just kind of like the aesthetic. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that I'm evil myself, but it has that aesthetic to it. So Red Swan, because of my dance background, and then because of this whole like personality thing, where it's like Farhan and Mr. Hawk, and whether it's evil or not, and with a combination of all like the women who have been in my life since I was younger, I was like, okay, what do I do to like, my first collection has to be me, like it has to really be me, so how do I present that properly? So what better way to represent dance than to bring in ballet? So it was very heavily inspired by Swan Lake and Black Swan. So you have like the innocence of the White Swan, the darkness of the Black Swan, but I didn't like how the story kind of stops there, where White Swan gets killed off at the end because she was perfect. I thought there needed to be more to that, because I personally wouldn't see myself as the White or the Black Swan. It would definitely be the Red Swan. So the Red Swan is kind of like that embodiment of both sides, the innocence and like the darker, sexy side. If you look at the collection, there's ribbon all over the collection, like there's ribbon everywhere. And that's because in ballet you have ribbon. Like that's a ballerina's favorite thing, is her ribbon that she ties. Being something that's so pretty, it is really strong. So that's why ribbon was used with the whole collection, because it represents that strength. I just hope people just understand that it's not pretty clothes on the runway. I hope they get that story, you know? Like, yeah. And also the models are working so hard. Every single second they're asking me, they're like, oh my god, like, what is the story? What do you want us to portray? And I was like, listen, like, just go on that catwalk as an animal, not like as a model. So starting the show, you start with sketches. You start to figure out, like, hey, what do I want to show? What silhouettes do I want? And I think it was really important to somehow progress the show, so you have White Swan, Black Swan, and Red Swan. So at first I was trying to brainstorm, what does the White Swan look like? What does the Red Swan look like? What does the Black Swan? Without making them look like the ballet. Like, I didn't want them to look like the ballet. They're inspired by the story of the ballet. So that was really important. So it was like sketching first, and then figuring out like, okay, what fabrics do I want to use? Then we start making the patterns, which takes forever because the pattern turns into a muslin, and then you fit the muslin to see, okay, what works, what doesn't work. And that's when you can actually physically see it in front of you. Then we start making it out of the real fabric, and then sometimes even like I've made it in the actual fabric and hated it and cut it out completely from the show. This collection had 12, but for this collection I definitely did like 40 sketches, and then it was kind of like, I don't like that, I don't like that, I like the top of that, and I like the bottom of that, let's put that together. And it's kind of like trying to figure out, okay, what do I like? And then also, I think after all the sketches are done, then you have to think about, okay, do people want this? Like, do people want to buy it? Do people resonate with it? Is it going to come down the runway and are they going to gasp, or are they going to just applaud and not care too much about it? So the storyline for Red Swan, it goes from White Swan, Black Swan, Red Swan. First of all, the show opens with a wedding gown, and usually shows close with a wedding gown, with the idea, I think, that they gave, like, society has given women that, like, oh, like, wedding, or like your wedding is like your final stage in life, like that's the part that you're aiming for, like that's your end goal. So that's why I opened the show on purpose with a wedding gown. And then as you see the white swan progress, you have like a little bit of sparkles in the second look to give it a little more glam. And then we have the black swan kind of seeping in for the third and the fourth look. And then we have the black swan, which is a very like sexy section of the show, very rebellious section of the show, and the models were specifically chosen for that. One of the models, Marina, she came for her fitting, and halfway through her fitting she asked if she can go out for a smoke, and then I was like, wait, you smoke? And we had just decided, I was like, you're gonna smoke in the runway. And then we have the red swan, which kind of closes the show because it's supposed to be that same element, but make it so that if the white swan were to wear it, it would make sense. And then obviously like we have our finale look, which is this huge gown, and it's a really statement piece with feathers and leather, and just every element of the show just comes into the last look. In my opinion, I think the show went very well. I'm still processing the fact that a show had happened, like it hasn't sunken in fully. But I think mainly because like the team, they worked so well, and like I had no reason to be stressed out. I know a lot of people during the show was very stressed out, like pre-show or after the show, they're just very like stressed out and hoping it goes well. But for me, I felt at ease the whole process. I was just having the time of my life, like living my life. So I had Sam and Saraf as my PR team. And I knew it was apparent, like I needed a PR team, which was helpful because I didn't have that network. And it was very important to me that people knew who I was, especially other designers within the city. Because it was definitely the show, one of the biggest parts of the show was to make a statement.
And basically I'm his PR manager, so I'm taking care of like everything, models, photographers, everything you name it for this show. Like I'm in charge of like organizing everything for tonight.
I've been helping with the casting. I was there for the casting to check in with the girls, to see the walks, to give feedback, to write down notes, and to help Mr. Hawk with the process.
So it was Saraf, Sam, Anna L, Laura, they were all at the casting, and I sat down and I explained like who I wanted, and I definitely didn't want just models that would walk on and walk off. It had to be models who brought their personality on the runway and really told the story of the Red Swan. Like the outfits that we had picked for them was picked based off of their personality. And the models and the makeup artists all worked hand on hand. Like the makeup artist Rosa and Kari, they worked with the models worked with me, and it was like this big like circle of like everybody kind of feeding off of each other's ideas.
It's all about story and passion and celebrating the villain, female villain.
Right, it wasn't like a regular runway. It was like a lot of emotion, and kind of like you feel the emotion when you're walking down the runway. It wasn't normal fashion.
Beyond grateful to be a part of the Red Swan collection.
It's really beautiful to see like him empower all of us, and he's just so passionate about what he does.
My biggest concern was will people like it and will people understand it? But the second that first look hit the runway, I like it was insane. Apparently a few people cried, which really like that really got me. Because, so right now, as Mr. Hawk, I said, is kind of in the building mode. So right now I think it's just teaching people who I am, like teaching people like this is Mr. Hawk. However, I do plan, hopefully even within the next year or so, like taking my show to New York and eventually get myself to Paris in some way, shape, or form. And finding investors who believe in the brand, who believe in the label, and believe in helping. I think for the next couple of months I'll be working on my next show, basically.